Like to call the meeting to order tonight for the Planning Commission of Oconee County. Invocation.
Yes, sir. Pray with me if you like. Father, particularly during this time of week here and this week, Thursday, but each day, help us to be grateful. Now to be grateful for this time to get together, to be free, to have this deliberative assembly, and to do business. Call upon you as the giver of wisdom and insight and creativity and order and efficiency to bestow those gifts to us tonight as we do this work. That you would create in us very appreciative hearts for the very smallest of things and the very largest of things, and the ability to see your many gifts. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Pledge of allegiance. All right, you want to lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Minutes, approval of the meeting minutes from last meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
Gwen, did you see any typos?
To be honest, I didn't read it, I wasn't here, so I know I can correct it or whatever, but
I'll make a motion.
Have a second? Second. Any comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Public comment. We have 3 people that want to speak. So I think we'll go ahead and do that at the beginning of the meeting. Since we don't have that many. Mike Smith is up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mike Smith, and my standard disclaimer still applies. I wanted to make a few comments about item 10 on the agenda tonight, the vegetative buffer. I'm going to refer to it as a lake buffer. First, I received the draft at about noon today and would like to suggest that this topic be tabled until the public has had time to review it, and more importantly, the Commission has also had time to review it so that everyone can have a well-thought-out discussion. To push this tabling suggestion further, perhaps someone from the Commission will ask David, let's put him on the spot tonight, if there is a minimum time requirement from when a draft proposal is made public before it goes before the Commission for discussion. As everyone knows, the lake buffer is a sensitive topic because of the negative economic impact it can have on the county and a negative habitat impact on the lake if the shoreline is not protected. There are several phases to home construction, and we must not become myopic and just focus on the construction phase during this discussion. We must be concerned about the pre- and post-construction period also. Some areas of concern that I wouldn't be able to address in detail tonight because of my short review time are such as these: embedding silt fencing with wire backup and maintained throughout the construction phase. Embedded silt fencing should be the primary system used with the other systems as backup. Reducing the proposed path width from 6 feet to 5 feet. The width of the outside golf cart tires is less than 4 feet, so we have more impervious surface in the lake area. What about turnarounds for these paths? Can they be a 360-degree turnaround that sometimes looks similar to a small helicopter landing pad? Street storm water runoff. What type of water mitigation runoff can be used after the water exits the road pipe? Where is the terminating point of piping for water runoff from driveways and roof gutters? Documenting of mature trees in the buffer area. If trees are replaced, is there a reset time? And if so, how long? Does the grandfather clause apply to someone who has built several years ago and lets the buffer area deteriorate so that they have silt runoff and no vegetation? Again, I hope you'll table this topic for discussion until the next Planning Commission meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Tom Markovich?
Good evening. For the record, I am Tom Markovich, and got several little things to speak about. Number one, traditional neighborhood development. I really don't understand what we're doing here. I've never seen a traditional neighborhood development that didn't allow some small amount of retail. Two, requiring all the roads be private and then differentiating between alleyways being private versus everything else being private makes absolutely no sense to me. Requiring sidewalks, while I understand how it fits into traditional neighborhood design, at the same time, here's a subject that the county has no interest in. Most municipalities, if they didn't have to have a sidewalk, would never have a sidewalk. Why? Because trees tear them apart and they're constantly having to maintain them. In this particular situation, you put it in a thing where nothing's going to be approved by, or it's not going to be accepted by the county, and therefore it all becomes private. Something just doesn't add up there. And two, evidently you don't want any school buses in there, because you cannot put a school bus on a private road, period. So I don't know where that thing's going, why it's being designated the way it is. Two, the buffer. I've always been a proponent of the buffer. I think the buffer does a lot to help save the lake in some ways. At the same time, I do and always have objected to the idea that we're going to take and connect certificate occupancies and other types of permit requirements and that, and tie it to this buffer, mainly because contractors are just that. We're contractors. We don't own the property at all. And so what we do is come in and build a house. The homeowner owns that property. They're the ones that are responsible for whatever DHEC rules and everything else. Yet when you attach it to a certificate of occupancy or other types of permitting, now all of a sudden you're involving the home builder in it, and he's not got a dog in the fight, period. So, like I said, I mean, we put in good, strong silt fences. I've always maintained and held that the buffer is a good thing. But when you start mixing and mingling and try to tie the contractors' permits and everything, that's just going in the wrong direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. 15 seconds to spare. Ben?
Thank you. My name is Ben Turetsky. I'm with the Friends of Lake Hiowee. We too are in love with buffers. I'm not quite sure. I think there are lots of problems that we have to deal with. As far as what you're talking about tonight, just one recommendation, and that is that we make sure that we sync what our regulations are, requirements are, with what Duke's requirements are. Because as we all know, Duke owns anything from 800, in some cases up to 810, a lot of it at 804 for major subdivisions. And I think they have some regulations that say, and I think Mr. Anthony, before he went belly up, recognized it. He cut about a mile of land. He cut everything down to 25 feet. Forgetting the fact that it was crescent land and it had a 50-foot covenant. I think he ended up spending about $1 million replacing three times as many trees as there were that he cut down. So the buffers are critical, and they really should be, nothing should happen to negate them. I think there are a number of things that Mike brought up that are certainly solvable. There are some other things I'd like to talk about, though, and we've had a number of things that occurred this year. One at Mountain View Estates, and also at South Oak Point. where the developer went in because the builder, the owner rather, wanted to have their house way down close to the water rather than in line with the other homes. He knew better, or he certainly should have known better because he's built a lot of houses over there. And he did right after it was all over, but nevertheless, you ended up with a situation where quite a bit of silt ended up going into the lake before they could really do anything about it. The second thing was almost the same situation over at Kiwi, Kiwi 1, where, again, you had a house that was up near the road, Azure Court, and then you had a lot in between, and the person who bought the lot said, I want to have my house all the way down next to the lake. And that was even a messier situation that there was a lot of spatting going back and forth between neighbors who lived next door because an awful lot of silt ended up going into the lake, and it was almost uncontrollable. So I think what might be a good thing to think about is really that, and I know that some people will disagree with it, was to put into effect a grading permit, so that from the get-go, the county knows that this is the grading permit, and this is what has to be done. This is land that's left undisturbed, and that would, I think, help an awful lot of things. Another one really is Pickens County actually has a lifetime for an approved plat. And I think it's 5 years. If you don't execute and start doing anything, you lose your vesting in Pickens County. In Oconee County, that doesn't happen. And
Ben, I'm gonna have to stop you there. I've let you run over
okay,
by almost a minute already.
thank you.
All right.
I'll
Thank
send you a note with that issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. All right, staff update?
Yes, sir. So the last few weeks, we've done about 36 zoning new houses, kind of slowed down a little bit over the last couple weeks. Also, the Agricultural Advisory Board, which is also our staff as well, they came up with a slogan for themselves, the Oconee Grown. And they're, at some point in the near future, want to come and make a presentation to the Planning Commission about it, try to get a little more interaction with the agricultural sector of the county and the Planning Commission. So, that's what I got.
Thank you. Election of chairman?
Yeah, I was just talking, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I was just talking to Adam about that. The motion that was made last time was to table it until the full commission was there. That essentially works as a motion to postpone until a time certain, and that time certain is when all 7 of you are here, so it'd be out of order to do it today based on the motion. So
So we're gonna pass on that.
pass on that.
All right. Discussion of planning commission schedule for 2018.
Yes, sir. So we're all welcome to choose, whatever times and dates. Right now, we do first and third Monday. The only special exception, if you all were interested in changing anything, would be January, where right now the 1st and the 15th are the first and the third Mondays, which happen to be New Year's Eve and Martin Luther King Jr. Day, 2 days that I'm not gonna be here. So, or this class will be closed. So, would you like to choose another day in January, or just skip over not having meetings in January? Or is there, what would you all like to do?
Did somebody say we couldn't do the 8th or the 22nd?
Those 2 days are taken by other things, right? The 8th and the 22nd.
The 8th is Agriculture Advisory Board, the 22nd should be the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting if anybody puts in an application for a Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. So it's not a guaranteed meeting, but it has a space there in case anybody has. Or the 29th may be available as well, maybe if you want to do the 29th, which is the last Monday. But I believe a couple people had issues with that day, the last meeting. So we could do Tuesdays and Wednesdays are probably not great days, although there's no one else's schedule's been set. You just default to that. County council and the other boards would probably maintain their schedule. But Thursdays, generally speaking, are open.
What about Tuesday the 9th? If county council meets on the 3rd, I mean the 2nd.
I believe that's free. I'll have to double check that. I didn't look at that date in particular, but I could look at that.
We do the 9th and the 23rd in January on Tuesdays, and then go back to Monday schedules in February.
That's Tuesday, that should, I don't,
Except February 19th
Yes,
is
President's Day.
President's Day, but
would you all like to keep for the rest of the year, exception of January, would you like to keep the first, third Mondays as current schedule? And then
Yeah.
for January, we want to switch it up to the 9th and the 23rd.
I think so.
Okay. And I believe we can vote on that, right? It's got to be voted upon, or, all right, and then just, has to be voted upon,
Need a motion.
I believe so.
And
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion, we have our meetings first and third Monday throughout 2018, with the exception of January, where we will have the meeting the 9th and the 23rd.
Second that motion.
Do we need to add February to that?
Well, that's what I was fixing. February the 19th is President's Day. Is that,
I didn't dig too far into February, as far as what was available. No other schedules have been set as of yet. They're usually set in January. That's why I want to get ahead of the ball on that one. If 19th, if we have, so you said the first Monday's the 29th, or the 12th, and the 19th.
Does
February the
anybody
first
have an
Monday.
issue with a meeting on President's Day?
I don't know if we're,
Building is
if the
closed.
buildings, are y'all,
I'm trying to find out if we are or not, I'm not getting a signal for some reason.
can we just leave it the first and third, vote now for that, and then check in on the 19th and see what that date, if it's a open
works.
date for us? And if it's not, we can change it to a different date.
Yeah, I would say let's move January. I mean, if you scroll down through the whole year, we have Memorial Day, Labor Day, but I think we've dealt with that in the past, and just not, limiting, every now and then to 1 month of meeting. I mean, we could sit here and
Yeah.
Yep,
play
that
the whole
works.
year and not get anywhere, so.
Yeah.
So, motion is to, continue on the Monday schedule except for January.
Right.
I've lost January.
Which
now.
would be 9 and 23.
9 and 22.
Okay.
Or 23.
23.
All right, and we did have a
And a
motion
second.
first and second. Okay, any more discussion? All those in favor? Say
Aye.
any opposed? Motion carries. Discussion on T and D, the zoning district.
So, if I may, the Planning Economic Development Board, Councilman Kane, Julian Davis, and Mr. Hart, voted on us creating this, traditional neighborhood development. Although in some, you call it traditional neighborhood development, a lot of times people think of having a mixed commercial. This is more of a, just strictly residential usage. So people could have lots of any size they want to, with an emphasis on the, the public realm, so to speak.
Have you had any comment from any of those that have seen this, the three? Paul, Mr. Kane, Mr. Davis, and Mr. Hart, have they seen what you've proposed?
The backup has been published. I don't directly contact them. That usually goes through Katie Smith.
Well, I know Mr. Kane's seen it, so.
All right. Now, I have, no, feedback wouldn't come through me, generally speaking, no, sir. But I haven't heard anything about this. This just kind of follows up. Patrick Square in Clemson was is the closest, thing that represents traditional neighborhood development. So I definitely copy and pasted, utilized some of their information regarding some of this information. So there's a lot of proven in their code, things that create their development. I've also attached the zoning matrix. I did, as you all, I didn't think anybody would notice me removing the one zoning district just so I could fit it all on one page, but the one thing you all did notice, we didn't lose the zoning district, I just needed the space on the page. And those are potential possible uses for it. And that's once again up to what you see fit, but it's mostly all things that normally would be associated with residential uses.
Except for maybe airstrips?
Yeah, that
Right.
was a lot.
You know what, but so I took that out and I thought about it because coming from Florida, there's high-end airstrip communities that they like, John Travolta has a, jet parked in the back kind of thing. So because we allow golf courses and things of that nature, I just kind of was like, oh, well, maybe somebody wanted to have a airstrip by their house at one point in time.
Yeah,
I don't think that's gonna be in a walking community with little houses squinched together.
Probably not, no, sir. But this has a, so there's no minimum lot size or no, if you all wanted to have minimum densities, things of that nature. So we can walk through this line by line, or you can just give me feedback on it, or how would you like to, we can get feedback from that planning and development board. What would you care to do?
Let's just, easiest thing to me, let's start with the zoning matrix real quick.
Sure.
Run through that.
Well, I've got one other question before we go to that, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
This is supposed to be the old-time neighborhood, correct? The basic.
I believe that's the intent, yes, sir.
So why are we not allowing like old-time little store type things, little, corner grocery type things? I mean, if we're wanting to go back to traditional, that was part of that. They had the little mom and pop,
the barber shop or whatever.
yeah,
Right.
convenience store, you know, they sold
Candy shop.
pops, candy and things. We're not allowing that in here at all.
So currently, we have the Plan Development District, the PDD, which is that, it could be mixed for mixed use, has a commercial element to it. There were some issues out of other parts of South Carolina where people were just using the PDD and a strictly residential usage. And that was just to circumvent other zoning laws. Like, oh yeah, we're gonna make this PDD, it's just because they didn't want to obey the setbacks or things in the other developments. They just made it strictly residential. I believe that came some legal problems. There were some cases about using the PDD for strictly a residential usage. So the traditional neighborhood development is, while it doesn't have the corner stores, which people often associate, and even Patrick Square to that, using that has a commercial element, can be used to basically, write your own rules for a residential community, strictly residential.
So if they want to do the commercial aspect of it, or the little mom and pop stores, they have to be PDD.
That would be the way to do a
And
mixed
they
use.
can do everything in that they can do in traditional neighborhood.
And even, there's no requirements for sidewalks and things of that nature and really public space in the PDD. It's, write your own thing. I think several of you are here for the Equus, PDD. And so they can do what they want.
Are we then adding something to the matrix that somebody can accomplish somewhere else in the matrix?
The road right-of-ways, as Mr. Markovich spoke to, right now there's a 50-foot right-of-way on any road you're gonna put in there. It serves more than 11 addresses, 10 addresses. You're putting a road in with a 50-foot right-of-way. Currently, we don't allow sidewalks either. That's a special exception variance. So by allowing a developer to build whatever size right-of-way road they want to, that actually becomes a little less restrictive, although we're requiring street trees and sidewalks. So there may be a little give and take in that. And once again, as it was mentioned, this county not absorbing the roads into the system prevents the county from having to maintain street vegetation and sidewalks.
So PDD is not necessarily a write your own design then?
Right, because, and now, I'm sure you could go against, or I guess against, you can circumvent some of the engineers, and you could do this in there, but do this kind of development in there. This allows a more of a template. You wouldn't have to jump through more hoops. Okay, it does have to get approved by the county engineer, but you know that you're not fighting against 50 feet, or whatever the right-of-way may be. Okay, well, I'm gonna put in a 10-foot lane with street parking and street trees and sidewalks, and I know I'm not facing an uphill climb against, like the NACDO manual or the State Arms manual.
So we just need to go through the matrix then, and with that vision in mind, then
Well, I think we zip through the matrix and then come back to some of this other stuff, because, airstrips,
We can take it out, I just left stuff in there, so.
Yeah, that's a little.
yeah, that would be more in residential to me and creating something entirely different. I would suggest that auditorium, indoor public assembly be part of it though. I mean, if there is some meeting space for this small community,
Okay.
some gathering spot.
Now, would public be considered a commercial use? Because it's a public auditorium, therefore you could turn in, it'd be a commercial use, so to speak. So if you had concert hall in there. Not that that's really
Did
what.
that satisfy the commercial requirement for PDD?
I think it probably would. I don't know about percentages in the PDD. I think that the case law was strictly in one situation where they're just using a PDD for purely residential purposes, purely to circumvent the setback and lot size, really lot size requirements. So, to answer your question, I think that would kick you over to a PDD properly.
Except that you've got to fight in the 50-foot.
Right away. And if you're doing a big development, just like, I'm not sure, I didn't look at the right of ways for the Equus development, but I believe everything's on the table in that regard. But you already know that you have to address that issue, the road right of ways and things you'd like to do.
Well, you're permitting daycare facilities, that's a commercial.
Some of these went through, the bed and breakfast thing too, so I take that out, and so communication hours were already special exemption, everything else. I don't know if that's something you all like to live, that's on the bottom of the first page.
The other one that jumped out at me was public, private, and commercial parks and recreation can't be.
Can we hold on a second? Let's go back to farm and roadside markets. Farm and roadside markets indicate that you're producing something in agriculture, and you're saying you can't produce in agriculture, so I would take that one out. Even though you're leaving in the roadside stand, which would still permit, that would still permit, like, little kids to sell lemonade.
Right.
On the side, but I don't believe that you need to permit farm and roadside markets if you don't have farms or road, or,
Okay, so
you're saying
that,
you can't have agriculture, therefore you should not need a farm stand.
So,
I'm glad the farming person brought that up.
And there's no emergency services allowed, so they can't have a fire station in the area.
can we go back to the farm and roadside market real quick?
Go.
Only because I've been to a community where there was like this, and one Sunday a month, the farmers would bring produce to the city square, the little town square, and sell their produce there, and all the people came out of the residences to buy that once a month. And it seemed to work out really cool.
And that, I think you would allow that in your roadside stands,
Yeah.
under P.
Okay,
The last page.
okay.
Yeah.
So we're good there, just taking it out of here. Roadside market then.
So we're done with the first page here?
I think we're done with the first thing, second.
Okay.
Seeing more and more commercial here.
Sir?
Seeing more and more commercial stuff that's going into this, so we just well stay with the PDD and skip this.
That's what y'all like to do, I mean,
Um,
I can think of anything that
well,
requires.
but you're telling us PPD just can't be
Strictly residential.
strictly
So
residential.
we have to have, and it,
Right.
Well, you're keeping adding commercial things into this.
I'm not disagreeing with you,
What's the percentage?
good point.
Commercial?
15%.
Give me one moment.
I mean, that may be the big difference if you have
Well, the big difference I'm hearing so far is this allows substandard roads.
It's not necessarily substandard, it's just our standard happens to be 50 feet. So, yeah, you can call it substandard, I suppose.
And in the PDD, I believe the commercial is required,
Yep.
as opposed, here it is allowed.
Well, no, it's not supposed to be allowed at all. It's supposed to be
But
strictly
yeah,
residential.
I mean, it does sound like we're allowing something that we're requiring someplace else and saying, we don't want it here, but we're gonna allow it here.
I think it says the primary uses, so there may be flexibility as opposed to the other, where there's a percentage that has to be commercial. I mean,
Okay,
And the state statute doesn't have any percentage for the PDD, but I don't know, yeah, I couldn't get it wrong.
I thought
All right.
ours did, I thought ours
It
required.
seemed
it was
like 20% or
15%.
30% in my mind, but I couldn't.
Was it 20? I was thinking 15, but
I
yeah.
just don't remember it.
Give me a moment, I'll find. PDD, definition, blah, blah, blah.
Let's see.
Then I really could have.
And did it also not have some requirement for public access, which was why he put the Sunday afternoon polo matches or something in there that?
I don't know why it would give me access to the, my other research stuff.
Can't have golf courses in there, that's commercial. Driving range, well, that's all commercial. If this is wanting this to strictly be residential, that don't need to be in there.
And maybe we need to refer this back to the committee that's asked.
There's
for
not a
it and
minimum,
say, would you like to clarify whether you want?
Mr. Root?
Yeah, if I could, Mr. Chairman, I wasn't at the Planning and Economic Development Committee. I know that Mr. Kane and Mr. Davis did want to start looking towards something that was like Patrick Square and making this possible, but I wasn't there at the meeting, so I don't know how this is referred. So I could, was it sent, did it say, hey, Adam, go draft up an ordinance and
Yes.
bring it back to us? Or did they try to refer it to the Planning Commission and then to bring it back to Planning and Economic Development? How is it procedurally done?
when Mr. Mulder was there, and they asked me to bring it to Planning Commission, and then Planning Commission to bring it forward. So I assumed forward meant to County Council, although it could be back to the Planning and Economic Development Board, which that part I didn't clarify, although I was told to bring it to Planning Commission.
And Patrick Square has a significant commercial
Commercial.
section.
Correct.
And that's,
So that's.
And that was done as a PUD, Planned Unit Development, which is our PDD.
Right, and that goes back to why are we reinventing the wheel if they need to clarify, do they want a planned use development or a residential only use development? Before we make it
if their same example is we would like something like Patrick Square, we already have a place
We already
holder
have a
for
place for
that.
that, right.
I would tend to agree. Did you all discuss that?
We discussed the planned development district not being able to do strictly residential. And that was the crux of the conversation. I believe a couple of them had been to some kind of convention, meetings or otherwise that had that traditional neighborhood development idea of being able to build, what it was, Mayberry kind of thing. Commercial wasn't addressing it because of the aforementioned people using PDD as strictly residential having legal issues, or counties having legal issues after allowing PDDs. So if from the zoning matrix, if we just removed everything that required money, exchanging hands outside of selling houses, that would clarify that.
And you need to allow places of worship in it. You got an X on that.
Well, and I'm also looking at home businesses. I mean, even in residential, how do you exclude a home business like that?
Well, it's not excluded, is it? It's allowed.
Groups,
Home
I'm
occupation
sorry.
it's conditional, so you
conditional,
would have to apply for something which does seem a bit, does that mean that the lady of the house cannot sell 31 bags out of her, off of her Facebook page?
They're all conditional. I just left it as that. I mean, if you look across the rest of the matrix, home occupation businesses are all commercial, although Oconee County doesn't issue any business licenses. So unless someone put up a big sign saying, Jan's Sewing Shop, but they're all
Okay.
conditional uses.
Maybe my idea of going at this through the matrix to start out was a bad one, so. Let's go back to the definitions and
Sure.
setbacks and I guess, in here, to me, we're requiring sidewalks where, we don't require sidewalks in other communities. To me, that would be a developer-driven thing if you want sidewalks. On-street parking is permitted and encouraged. Wouldn't that make wider streets?
If you have two-way streets, you can also do one-way streets.
Again, what Mr. Markovich said in his opening statements about the roads, I don't know, it just seems like there's a lot of holes in here that need to be plugged before we can consider this. On-street parking, to me, is a traffic jam. If we're not planning, if you have a neighborhood and you're not planning for parking for guests and what have you, and I've been through Patrick Square when people are parking on one side of the street, and with a F-150 truck, you're gonna lose your mirrors half the time, so, I don't know if we throw this out and start over, or we try and make this work, or we go back, and I think we discussed it last time, adding a provision in PPD, making that, you know, being able to do a PPD for residential only and not have to reinvent the wheel.
I don't believe we could do that because it's a state statute creation, but
Okay.
there's also cluster development, which I think is similar to that, which is in the state statute that you could go off of. I think, so we wouldn't necessarily have to create something this specific, but I think the vision, and I haven't been at that meeting, but knowing what Mr. Kane, I believe, was thinking is heading this up, he did want to create the Mayberry-esque front porch template that someone could dive into as opposed to a PDD, which is kind of wide open, and maybe if somebody wants to build that, then they can, you know, develop it, and that way we can sign off on it, the council can sign off on it. Perhaps the best way is to get this to Mr. Kane as the chairman of that committee, see if this captures somewhat of the vision of what they're talking about, and then bring it back.
Can we send it with questions? Just
Oh,
say,
yeah, absolutely.
this sounds great, who doesn't want Mayberry? But here are the questions that we have as far as more specific direction for what we need.
I think that's a great idea.
And then let them address it and send it back to us with, you don't have to do this, but please look at this.
Okay.
Do
I
you
do
need that as a
have-
motion?
Well, so I think I'm gonna ask some questions, Mr.
Do you
Johnson.
have those specific questions?
Well, I think I've been over here writing
Yeah,
like
I mean,
mad on
we've kinda
this,
talked about 'em as-
on this
as
part,
one-
yes, I think we've got some very serious questions.
Mayberry, you have some commercial in there. The PDD would accomplish that, it seems like, if you're allowing for those. Two, do we really want to take on some of the challenges that we already see in Patrick Square? Some of the,
Road width and parking.
exactly.
And I guess, does this need to be like a plug and play for a developer? I mean, do we need to go through all the minor details? Or do we allow the developer to figure that out? Or do they want it to where a developer walks in and say, here you go, we've laid everything out for you? How detailed do we need to be?
Yeah, I mean, when I read a sidewalk network must connect all homes and buildings, that word all is encumbering.
Okay.
On-street parking is encouraged.
There's some great stuff in here, and the work is greatly appreciated from me if this is something that council wants in our county. But I think just our own questions in the use matrix and the question about requiring sidewalks and what ends up happening to them in the future, I think we need more direction from council and what they're looking for.
Addressing, adopting it into the county road network? Is that a question as well? Is that what you're going for? I don't know.
Repeat that again.
So a little minor point of contention was the county not adopting or, taking these into the road network for maintenance. Was that something that you want me to bring up to the planning committee as
Yeah,
well?
I think that's a good question.
I think that's a very big question.
And just ask them, do they want it all residential with no commercial whatsoever? Is that their intent for this? Because if they're wanting Mayberry, it had that particular picture in most people's mind. It had mom and pop little stores and barbershops and what have you in there, It didn't have an airstrip that I remember, but it had most of the stuff.
At a gas station.
Yeah.
There you go.
But it had to be, it has to be small in this particular type of design, but they were there.
And again, not criticizing the work that's been done here, but I just read things that, cul-de-sacs are not permitted as a right.
Yeah.
Those black lines, there's no, nothing's gray and then it says, we just went over this in, corridors, T&Ds are encouraged to have multiple entrance points off of public road networks. We just spent 3 weeks talking about multi-point entrances not being encouraged in, right-of-ways.
Right.
So we're contradicting ourselves, sidewalks, we're contradicting ourselves.
Okay.
Again, no offense to the author.
Hey, it's Patrick Square stuff. I copy and paste. Polonius plagiarism.
But I do think we need some better clarification from the requesting parties.
So I'll type up these questions and then we can wait till the next meeting to look at them, vote on them, or they can be passed along the same way the letter was, however you all would like to go about that.
I thought we send them straight to them. We don't need to, I mean, we know, you know what our questions were, and if we wait and have a meeting, and then we send it to them,
Yeah.
then
I
Just send it
say, I
straight.
say send repeat.
Sure. So first question would be zoning matrix. Please clarify the uses for the zoning matrix. The plan development district will allow a multi-use commercial residential, but we're looking at just residential, or are we looking at just mixed use? The challenges of Patrick Square regarding their transportation matrix, traffic jams, people losing mirrors, things of that nature. Do we need to go through the details? How detailed are you looking to be? Is this a framework, or is this just some guidance? Sidewalks need to connect everything, yes or no? Do we need to require sidewalks? Is the county gonna adopt these roads, or is the county not gonna adopt these roads? All residential and the commercial, I address that. Cul-de-sacs and multiple access points, please define more what you want from that road grid that really kind of defines the backbone of a community is the road network and sidewalk network. Other questions?
Excellent. That should get the ball rolling.
Sure. This is going to planning and economic development, which meets monthly, right? Well, bi-weekly. Quarterly. Oh, I was lucky.
Goes by fast though. Be here before you know it.
Discussion on amending vegetative buffer. I would like to note that this is discussion tonight. After our, sometimes I think we get caught between a rock and a hard place, is we have to come up with stuff to put out to the public. Then the public either likes it or doesn't like it, and then, we need to decide. So I think somehow we need to have a better flow of information back and forth between what the public desires and what we as commissioners are deciding. So tonight is discussion only. In my opinion, we're not going to be taking a vote on this. This will be a relatively short discussion. So I'm going to open up the floor for discussion on the changes in blue that,
I'll get up there.
that Mr. Chapman has written up. So with that, I'll open up discussion. Oh, everybody likes it.
Sweet.
Well, I'll start since I'm on the end down here, unless you want to start on that end down there.
Oh, go for it.
For me, I'm a little bit like Mr. Smith in that I really haven't had time to read it and look at it. I very much appreciate the work that you put into it, and for me, I would like to pat you on the back and say that anything in here, any change that you've made that makes your job easier as far as dealing with repeated phone calls and complaints and gripe sessions, I would say if that's possible to leave as a change, I would certainly do that, because if it's that big of an issue, we need to address it so that you don't have to deal with it. On the other hand, as I read it, just skimming it when I got here this evening, a zoning permit is required for work within the vegetative buffer, and then down a little bit lower, it says any applicable building permits. Well, I'm not a builder, and so the first thing that came to my head is, wait a minute, they can build within the vegetative buffer? So then, with your explanation, it makes perfectly good sense, but I don't know, it seems a bit strange to add something in the way of a permit when in fact what you're trying to do is protect the water from contamination in a storm or whatever. And that being said, I also feel like Mr. Smith in that, or who was it said a minute ago, that perhaps we all need a little bit more time, give folks time to come back with some comments on what they see, give us time to read it and ask Mr. Chapman, how does this sentence impact what we're doing as we move forward? And then let's get back together and look at this again. and address actual changes. Oh, I'm done. Does that make sense?
You what? I do have a few things I want to just, from a clerical standpoint, if nothing else, real quick, that I think that probably do need to be addressed. Triple I, so 5.3. It's the first mention of invasive species. I think we need to change that to invasive/poisonous. There is a federal list of invasive species, and poison ivy or poison oak is not included on that list, so.
You could use the term noxious.
Do what?
Noxious.
Noxious?
That's a native species, though.
Yeah. So, I would also like to
That's why I
say,
said use the word noxious.
I'd also like to say, use the words or phrasing in there, which is wonderful that you put that in blue, but it says unless otherwise protected by law. According to the Endangered Species Act,
Where are you at, sir?
on still 5.3, where you added the words in blue. 5.3, invasive or poisonous species may be removed without needing a permit.
Where in the world
Right, so, right.
I remember reading it, but yeah.
Second page, top of the page.
5.3, here, we've
Oh,
got
yeah, number
invasive
three, no-
species, we
no
want to add
development,
invasive.
vegetation removal.
So that looked good, except, well, again, we need, unless otherwise protected by law. And the reason I say that is, you go to the Federal Endangered Species Act, and there are 25 endangered plant species in South Carolina, many of which grow around the lake. And if you cut one of them down, it's a $25,000 fine per plant, according to the federal website.
Guys, it's on the second page, when you flip over, number 3 at the top of the page.
It's got one black sentence at the top, and then the rest is blue.
No development activity, vegetation removal, or soil, the summer shall
Yes.
occur in the
Right.
buffer area.
That's it.
Unless additional zoning permit is issued by the zoning administrator. Invasive species may be removed as of right and without needing a permit.
Yes, so invasive/poisonous.
Okay.
And then at the end of the sentence, unless otherwise protected by law, may be removed without needing a permit, or may be removed unless otherwise protected by law. And I'm sitting there saying, if we just as a county say, sure, go for it, and then they
Gotcha.
remove something that's an endangered species, according to the 25 in South Carolina, that would be one of them.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh, cool.
The next one would be 5-4, or IV. We've got in there that it, as far as unless the removal of dead or dying trees as confirmed by a certified arborist, that's actually in conflict with 5-9, where it just says come to you and ask you if they can cut down the dead tree.
I know what I was thinking. I'll clean that up.
So in one, you got to contact an arborist, which I think is, a dead tree. I hate spending $250 when everybody's got a dead tree out here. If
Right.
you can tell them,
Correct.
yeah, you're right, it's a dead tree. At the same time, people definitely take advantage of it without somebody putting eyes on it and saying all 40 of those trees were dead.
That happens.
If I can jump in here, in that same paragraph, Duke Power, DHEC, DNR will be notified. I think we were talking about by who or by whom, whatever the correct term there, by whom. I'm not sure who's notifying who. or-
Generally speaking, I'll call Duke if, like I see silt entering the water. If there's big enough bloom, something that seems like large enough, Duke will contact DNR. But also I've called, Department of Natural Resources as well as, DHEC, Mr. Detweiler, who does the stormwater for the area.
Yeah, we need to let them know who's gonna be calling.
The county will, down there.
So, continuing on that 5-VI or 5-6, as you get down through there, it said, that's where it's in conflict. Let's see, no, I'm sorry. This statement is in conflict with 5.2. It says that this is gonna be 25 feet from full pond is where the vegetative buffer exists.
Correct.
5-2 says 25 feet from full pond or 25 feet from the shoreline stabilization.
From the back of it, correct.
And so that second statement is in conflict with 5-2, which has the other. Now, I would tend to say 5-2 shouldn't be written that way.
So if I may clarify, so that, in which part of two, which part of six?
So let's start
Is-
over with 5-2 then. 5-2 says the buffer shall begin at the back of stabilization.
Sure.
I don't think that, I mean, I've seen stabilization go 16 foot up into the property. And so I think that it always should begin at the 800. And that second comment about begin at the back of stabilization, no, it begins at the 800, not at the beginning of stabilization.
So right now it reads may. That's where the shall is replacing may in there. Because that was fairly nebulous. So we'll just say, we could just get rid of,
I think it should just be gotten rid of altogether, that it just at the 800 period.
Measured from the 800 period.
You'd still leave the word shall begin at the 800-foot mark.
so basically just take off the whole bottom of that, okay.
That would then
Take out the at
make
the
6.
stabilization.
I'm sorry, that would then make
5-6.
5-6 be correct, 25 feet from full pond.
Okay,
That would be correct.
so knock out that part of 2, and it leaves 6 as it is in that regard.
Right.
Correct. So IX, what is that, 9? 5-9?
Yes, sir.
We have the invasive, we need to ask poisonous or noxious, again, put that in there. It says, trees that are clearly dead or damaged or dying may be removed with the permission of the zoning administrator. You may want to add and/or Duke, depending on location. One of the things that this buffer doesn't deal with is that sometimes you don't have a say. In that Duke is going to override, or Duke is going to have their own say.
Correct.
In many cases, that may be from 800 to 804 in elevation, maybe 15 or 20 feet, if it's a really level lot. And that's not necessarily owned by you to be able to have that. So, one, just the additional words and/or Duke, depending on location, and then,
The conflict with 9.
I mean, I put in here that Duke oftentimes talks about what can be cut down between the 800 and the 804, sometimes between the 800 and the 810, depending on which property you're looking at.
And for me, okay, just clarify for me, in the thing where it talks about, okay, on the second page, where it says, you're talking about what they can do, natural existing vegetation is encouraged, however, the following mix of plants shall be required for every 2,500 square feet. At the bottom, it says, a diverse mix of native plants and unmanaged, uncut below 12 inches and untreated native grasses where available and suited to the site. But then over here, we promptly say that it may be trimmed, pruned, or otherwise maintained. Do we need to, I don't know, do we need to go back and reinsert the 12-inch stand? Is that
Or take that out altogether.
I'm not
So, to clarify for myself, so also right below that, or other managed grasses, because managed is 12 inches or below and treated, right above it, just the next sentence down. So yeah, that, says we can clip it up there, says we can't, that's a sentence to take a look at up in 9.
It says one, we can't cut it shorter than 12 inches, and the other one, it says you can trim or prune to your,
The sentence Ms.
Boys, I
McPhail's
would
talking
assume.
about is in 9, it's, goes existing native vegetation outside the allowed 15% view lane may be trimmed, pruned, or otherwise maintained.
Yeah, and yet over here, the requirement for planting it says diverse mixture uncut below 12 inches. So it's got to be one or the other, right? I would think.
So right now, the way it reads, as it sits, it says basically 2,500 square feet, and then it gives these plants. Doesn't say why. My interpretation of that part of the code is that it's giving you, if you have a house that, you buy a house already built, that has this large sloping lawn, this is how you're gonna replant it, if you want to replant it. Or, in this case, we've also added mitigating circumstances. Nothing that's saying what has to be there already. Or what, you're required to replant it if you didn't cut it down, if you buy into the situation. But yeah, there's some incongruities, but that's why we're talking about it. It makes, more editing helps, usually.
And on that one, I just take that sentence out. It seems like I'm like Mr. Pearson. If you simply take it out, allowing them to trim, print, or otherwise maintain, then you've got that establishment over there. But I don't answer phone calls, so.
Right, but so if we took out that sentence that says, you have the 15%, you can do that as basically what you will unless it's over 6 inches or 4 feet. Then if we add no language of what you can do with the rest of it, then if somebody says, hey, my neighbor just clear cut everything except for those 6 inches, or those 6-inch trees,
I got you.
where do I stand?
Well, and I'm not, you have to get it into your position, but we've already said over here that if we're going to plant it, it's gotta be maintained at 12 inches. It seems like if 12 inches is a key point, then it needs to be maintained over here.
At 12 inches.
At 12
Correct.
inches or whatever.
So if we add a height for those, so that everything else doesn't really give
No.
like the azaleas and stuff don't give any sort of, like bushes,
And I
that's
don't
not.
think there should be I don't think there should be a height, period.
And if you wanna take it out, I can see,
If we're gonna put a height, we need to go back and tell people they can't mow their yards in their existing homes.
And that's already in the code where they're not allowed to mow it or fertilize it, but I think at least one person has.
Or put Roundup, or anything down in that.
Correct.
In other words, that vegetative buffer has to grow back up.
True.
And I don't know that we need to do that, so I'd rather take out the 12.
Okay. If I can, obviously, we have more editing to do here. The reason we're here tonight is because of a complaint, and the complaint was silt getting into the lake. So I think we try and solve silt getting into the lake and get out of all the other garbage.
So I don't
The
think,
people have paid a lot of money for this land. We just got called Nazis, fascists, whatever else in another meeting for telling people what to do with their land. I make my living on the lake. I want to protect the lake. I do the best I can. I'm going to have a silt fence blow out occasionally on a job. I repair it. I fix it. I don't know how I'm going to clean the mud out of the weeds that ran through my silt fence, but silt fences fail. It's a part of the game. We play with that. We work we do our best. This particular builder didn't heed any warnings, and now we're sitting here tonight, adding 15 paragraphs, tying us to certificate of occupancies and a bunch of other crap that we don't need to do. And I'm sorry that I'm coming on strong, but this is bull crap. Let's fix the problem. The problem is silt fences. Let's write in silt fences and call it a night. That's my opinion.
and are we even really handling this in a vegetative buffer area? That's a magistrate court decision to me, not a vegetative buffer ordinance issue. Am I wrong?
No. Our landscapers are going to have to come up and get building permits now.
Are they building? Things that need building
Are they going to have
permits?
to get permits to landscape a lawn?
I put permits in here just so we could talk about it, yes, sir.
We need them out,
Okay.
my opinion. I'm with Brad on this.
I do love some of the wording that was added here to provide clarification as to what you can do. I think too long within the vegetative buffer, people who have on the lake really cripple the people who don't yet have their house built on the lake. I see it every day. I say if you're gonna penalize the people who hadn't yet built, then we're gonna penalize the people who have, would be my opinion on it. But that said, none of this silt fence thing, I think, belongs in this, even belongs here. In this situation, none of what we've talked about here solves that issue. That issue to me is a magistrate, sue somebody in court over over that if that's what you feel strongly about. As opposed to vegetative buffer. Because I'm gonna turn around and then complain that your grass clippings have just gone onto my lot and been dumped there. And I'll do that in court rather than through here, that you need to put a silt fence up on your green grass because when you mowed, that now washed over onto my lot.
So I could remove stuff of the silt fences from the vegetative buffers, just take that out of here? Is that kind of what we're talking about?
You asking me?
Well, I mean, Mr. Johnson.
I'm thinking right now that we're dealing with a couple different issues. I love that we're bringing this vegetative buffer back to the table. I think that some things need to be cleared up on here. I also think this particular case is not gonna be solved by anything that we've done here. If that's,
Right.
and if it's our job to solve that case, I would love to see the pictures of what's been done so that we can really see the impact that was done and the negligence that may or may not have been done. And then make a determination, is this something we can solve here? Or is this something that should have been solved in the courts? I mean, why are we here with that part? Or does it go back to a building department as opposed to you in the zoning department? Is this a building department issue versus a zoning department issue? Oh, sorry.
I'm good, hang on for just a minute. I said we were gonna have a short discussion to give staff some time to come back with some stuff. I think we've gone on long enough for tonight since we have had a short time to digest this. I'm sure where I'm going with this, but, you know, there's a lot of good points brought up by Mr. Smith, Mr. Markovich, Mr. Tazerski, did I get that right? Tereski. You know, it just seems like, you know, we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You know, this thing was working pretty well. Yes, it does need to be clarified somewhat, but do we need to add 2 pages of more language in it? In my opinion, no. Maybe we do. But I think we really need to entertain, not create, you know, all of a sudden you're gonna say, I need another person in my office to manage all these permits and watch out for all these landscapers. Trust me, there's probably 2 or 3 landscapers in this county that would know how to read this. Nothing against landscapers, since we're on public record. But, we don't need to make it this complicated. We need to protect the lake. It's that simple. Let's protect the lake. With that, I'll recognize Mr. Markovich for 60 seconds, and then we're going on to the next agenda item.
One, you raised the issue about building codes or building department. It is not really something that comes under the building department. And the reason it comes under the zoning document is because that's where the buffer rests. It's in the zoning. Now, that's not to say a building permit can be affected by a zoning permit. In other words, your administrator can revoke or remove a zoning permit, and therefore now you've lost your authority to have your building permit in place, and so it can trigger a number of different things. But I come back to this whole idea too, in the sense that I understand where silt fences are the key to this whole thing. There's no question about it. And so whatever happens with the rest of the buffer thing is, you know, but protecting that lake, especially during construction activities, is all about silt fences, so.
Thank you.
Would you like a motion to return this to staff to?
Could I ask one question that maybe is something for staff to look into? What is Duke's opinion about the silt? Do they have a stance? Do they have requirements?
Duke's, as far as like adding flow to like dumping silt in the lake?
Yeah.
I can certainly ask. I'm sure they have some language about that. I bet you probably,
I know
DHEC.
at Lake Murray, anybody who wants to dredge out the lake and give them more volume in the lake, they love it. If you got silt or anything going into the lake, they're upset.
Oh, gotcha. So, Duke would allow you to dredge out portions of the lake. I've talked with one of their lakeshore management people. You can get permits for it and get it done. And I believe it's a costly venture, but you could dredge into the lake. South Carolina DHEC the stormwater on the
Well,
integrated
I'm
silt.
not looking to dredge the lake, I'm looking to what's their policy and stance on this runoff silt.
I will ask.
I recognize Ben for 60 seconds.
EPA lists silt as the number one pollutant. And the problem that evidently brought this whole thing to the fore was silt coming from a property under construction, maybe onto a house or a lot that was already constructed. DHEC, by law, will not handle anything under 1 acre as far as a breach of the law. There was a case where, and it was on Kokomo, I believe, where a builder, to go unnamed, was building a lot of houses, and a lot of silt ended up going across another person's property and under the dock. That's how bad it was. And D. Detweiler at DHEC was called. He came down, and he actually required the guy to get the silt out of the lake. So it can get very tough, and people don't understand the fact that if you're talking about lots that are 1 acre or less, DHEC really doesn't have any responsibility, and it becomes a neighbor-neighbor thing. And it's tough, because we get a lot of complaints like that also. But silt nevertheless is the number one pollutant, and it carries stuff with it when it goes into the lake.
And I agree. And again, we need to protect the lake. There's no doubt about it. That's how I make my living. Maybe I should have recused myself from this conversation because I'm a little bit emotional, but I mean, before it ever reaches the county, the HOAs are on me, the neighbors are on me. You know, there's a lot going on before it reaches the county offices. And we just, again, I think if we temper this thing, and, you know, I don't know the difference between poison oak or poison ivy, much less a killer weed that's gonna come out and get me at night. But anyway, so I appreciate the work that you've done. None of it's personal, but I just think we need to, you know, tone it back a little bit. Let's solve the problem. Let's not make more rules and more permits and make this more difficult. It's difficult enough out there to build a house, trust me. We've got neighbors, HOAs, nosy ninnies, anybody who wants to complain, they complain. Yeah, I deal with it all day long, every day, and we do our best. But is something gonna fail during the job? Absolutely. I mean, not every time, but it happens. We repair it, we put it back, and we do the best we can. It's the negligent builder or contractor, you know, that we need to have some teeth into this buffer without going overboard. So with that, I'll put my motion back in my pocket and we'll go on to number 11.
Well, I was just gonna make a motion that, we need to do something with this, right? We've
Okay.
had discussion. Now, in order for something to happen from all this discussion, we need to return it to staff with the suggestion that does anybody disagree with the silt fences addition, where we're strengthening the silt fences? Perhaps you go ahead and add that in. You've got the silt fences number 6. You've made changes, you've made suggestions and recommendations, which will in fact add to or give more teeth to the silt fences. And then give us time to look at these other things and bring it back to us, if you can, maybe perhaps shortening it a little bit, adjusting for some of the questions that we have about stuff, and then coming back with something that's a little easier to read.
Will you restate that motion?
Sure.
Do I hear a second? Any more discussion? Motion,
Oh, we didn't get, I didn't get a second, so,
yeah, we did.
oh, we did, okay.
Yeah. Any more discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Motion passes. We're gonna move that back to staff. Mouth is getting dry. Comprehensive review. Staff, please.
Let me pull this up real quick, please. So staff was asked to get the entire review done by this meeting. I apologize, I was only able to get 124 pages of it edited, so please don't let that detract from your overall opinion of me. So I got the goals section, the population element, the natural resources element, and the cultural resources. And none of this would have been possible without Bill Huggins and Sherry Williams, as well as Ms. Amanda Brock and Mr. Mulder as well. Everyone and a bunch of other people helped, kind of chip in to get this. The first section is the goals element. And depending on how we all want to go through this, we do have to look at them. And we don't have to go through all 124 pages if you want to. We just go through one section at a time. I believe that the section should be done in whole. If we're going to start one, we should finish one, just at least one element at a time versus kind of breaking it off. If I can always dress it up or change things, but if you like to go through the goals section first, and if it's up to you, but if we kind of go goal by goal or objective by objective and see if anybody disagrees, because this has a lot of information that's, I can't speak with any expertise with most of it. This all came well before I did. So if that's how you all like do it, we can kind of just go through it almost line by line-ish. And if anybody disagrees or if anybody goal by goal-ish.
I don't disagree on that, especially on the goals. I think the other three elements, if the commission is in agreement, that those were redone and we're not gonna, consider those done. We'll vote on that, but
Sure.
we probably do need to run through the goals as quickly as possible.
Certainly.
So, the floor is yours.
Well, you were just gonna say that you're gonna adopt the revisions to the other
No,
three?
uh,
I didn't understand.
Well, I said, let's run through the goals. The other three elements, I don't think we're gonna need to spend the time on. Those are the ones with the changes in the population bases that you all spent a lot of time on redoing.
I just started reading today, so you all didn't want to be in the
Yeah.
category. But just so long as I'm sure sending them to my council that y'all have reviewed them and you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, I probably jumped the gun there, so, I probably jumped the gun there on that.
I misunderstood what you
I didn't want the audience to think we're gonna sit here and go through 125 pages, so.
Oh, that's what I got. Yeah. All right, so the goal section, nothing changed on the entry page. It left, the only thing we changed in the goals were things have been done, haven't been done. If they have been done, then how they got accomplished, if they're ongoing, if they're continuing. So this first goal is preserve, protect, and enhance the quality and quantity of Oconee County's natural resources. Everything in red is basically done or ongoing, or I'm sorry, everything in blue is completed. Red means that either it's ongoing or it's completed and ongoing or there's something up with it. So, starting at the first objective, or the first strategy, I should say, that was completed, ongoing, with the water link to Seneca and Salem. That says water, right?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. The second item was not a county-initiated project. We don't, those are municipalities. It's up for the municipalities. The third item is completed will be completed with the end of with Fire Station 10 being constructed at the end of this fiscal year. So I'm gonna just keep going on this. PC to-do list, the first one, that's something that we can look at. That's something that the Planning Commission is a responsible agency for, and we can, at any given point in time, bring this up. Any of these PC to-do list things are things that if we need something to do, we got it. If you got time to lean, you got time to clean. This is, marching orders that we have inherently. Complete the implement all development. The sewer expansions were complete. PC to-do list, work with neighboring counties. If we'd like to reach out to our neighbors, it's there. Completing ongoing with the Joint Regional Sewer Authority, Golden Corners, established partnerships, TVA ARC grants, and then the last one's complete with marinas at Kiwi and Hartwell implementing, clean out sanitary stations, things of that nature. The top one, study and evaluate options available. Well, it's with the new census, they're not options, they'll be requirements. So we only missed out by a couple hundred people in the last census apparently, so this will be not an option for us. Same thing for the next one, it's as required, so we're suggesting doing something that we're legally bound to do. So that's why nothing really changed with that. And then stormwater, or protect watersheds, that's a DHEC item as was brought up. Anything over larger than an acre is a DHEC jurisdiction, and we don't have a stormwater department.
But we will have, right?
We can, sure.
Well, I mean, we will have when this federal regulation kicks in. So we will, don't we have to have a plan at that point?
Well, a plan, yes, but we won't have we don't have an in-house department.
Right.
Although we can bring that up if that's something you'd like to
Each one of these, or do we want
do.
to say we're gonna cover a goal each meeting?
But let's finish this
That's
first.
for the overhaul.
Do you want me to just keep going?
Keep going.
Yeah.
Sure, sure. All right, DHEC jurisdiction again. The established 7Q10, that's a minimum water flow level thing. That was done when the lake was really low and Atlanta was gonna come, that's ATL, Atlanta was gonna come and withdraw water from the Chattooga, and that was never done. A water commission was created, but no plans adopted. If we wanna partner with and develop a countywide educational program, that's on our PC to-do list. Study and evaluate impact of Coney County's water supply, that is complete. It has been done by emergency services. And sources and uses and outflows, that's something else planning commission can do. Soil and Water Conservation Commission's area of responsibility, that's not, although it says planning commission, that's not our house. We can work on it, but it's not our area of expertise. Partnerships with public-private entities are ongoing, and the establishment of the Oconee County Conservation Bank is an ongoing, it was established, but it's still a growing thing. Conservation Bank, complete ongoing, complete ongoing, complete ongoing. Review and update the various components of the Oconee County Comprehensive Plan as needed, not restricted to the minimum time periods established in state regulation. That's ongoing. As well as ongoing and improvements have been made in communications and cooperations between the county and the municipalities. PC to discuss if that's something that we would like to do as an infrastructure master plan. Something in the the early 2000s was made, like 2005-ish I heard was made up, but it was never adopted. So that's something that if we like to discuss doing, we can certainly discuss it and work it along. Infrastructure master plan was created, not adopted plan. The county cannot control the state or city roads. Although from our workshop, we can have some influence on the state roads. I imagine city we could work with, but that's, once again, that's a discussion if you all would like to have, we can. Seeking partnerships with other agencies, this is something that was talked about, our building code department is a one-stop shop. You get your power, you get your sewer, everything in that one place. Various other partnerships we've done. Maintain a capital projects plan. If that's something that the planning commission would like to do, we can do it. Identify and work with alternative revenue sources. It's an ongoing thing. Local option sales taxes. Impact fees are on the planning commission to-do list as well, and that's something to ask county council about.
Sure.
Yes.
I'm working on that with county council now. It'll be a few months down the road, but we're working on the impact fees.
I've heard rumors.
Yeah, sure, yeah. So, you can strike it off the PC to do this. Not that they're doing anything, they're just studying it.
Again, I've heard rumors.
Excuse me. Where was I? Okay, ongoing projects that are occurring for the rest of this, establish public-private partnerships, things of that nature. Once again, federal leaders to change formulas for figuring out vacation homes. That's something else we can work with, coming out with a formula to figure out who actually lives here full-time and who doesn't. At the bottom of the first chart. Objective 5, create and or update plans for specific priorities. That's a planning commission to-do list. We have done some things with municipalities, the ProPEX facilities, educational plans, Walhalla Industrial and Tech Park. The number 3 in the objective 5 is update the 2004 infrastructure master plan. That falls outside of our purview. Once again, recreation plans are ongoing with the recreation task force that already exists and meets quarterly, I believe, monthly. They're meeting monthly. So we have a recreation task force that does that, and it's an ongoing thing. We have completed in the GIS department. We are rock solid. We've done all those. They're all completed. And some of them are ongoing as well because technology is being updated, maps are being updated. But so GIS we're pretty solid on. All right, work with state and federal agencies to attract agribusinesses. The Oakway School and the Farm Center, the FARM is an acronym for something in marketing. That's an agricultural thing. We have the Agricultural Advisory Board, which is also good for agriculture. OEA and business partnerships for regional economic development. And we have ongoing at Tri-County Tech and the OITP. The funding mechanisms, that's a Senate Sante Cooper loans, and then engage government entities to consider, I can't read that. Well, the sixth one's ongoing. A lot of PC to-do list with the efficient, equitable, and mutually compatible distribution of land uses. This is all our house directly. As far as planning commission's goals, ongoing. The PC to-do list is also ongoing with the regional regulations regarding the development of steep slope areas. That kind of falls into tonight's conversations. Open space requirements for new developments. Strategies to adapt necessary to create a framework for efficient. That's sediment control. That's also tonight. Located in the IBC. I don't know what that is. So PC to-do list, ongoing litter control ordinances we have. We're also looking at doing code enforcement stuff. Pardon me for a second.
Well, he takes a break. I will put out there, and I don't know if Mr. Markovich was alluding to this or not, but the interplay between certain zoning enforcement mechanisms and building code enforcement mechanisms sometimes find their home in the International Property Maintenance Code, which does speak to erosion issues and the ability to make that not happen. Not saying that we have a good code enforcement situation in place, but we may.
Okay.
At some point in the future.
Thank you. Rezonings and overlays. That's something that's in the comprehensive plan that some people, like I didn't until I started really digging through this, like we were mandated for the overlays. So it's something that should stay on the agenda at some point. Ongoing for the rest of the OITP money and development, Seneca rail site, the demolition of the manufacturer site in Westminster, which may be built upon, as well as the Golden Corner sewer facility. So we're definitely working with, our neighbors, which is good. Community facilities, infrastructure, and public resources. The state chooses sites and handles traffic issues for schools. This was a question that was brought up at some point fairly recently. But yeah, we don't cite schools in the county. That's a state thing. Opportunities to support and enhance job training. We do so many career day fairs and leadership classes and the OITP classes and things of that nature. The school's getting 2.2 mils, which I heard is about $5 million. I'm not sure what that translates to, but that's a bunch of money. And the prioritization of expansion and upgrades of libraries is ongoing. Housing task force. We can create, if we want to look at affordable housing or different kinds of housing, there is a task force we can create if that's something that you all are interested in doing. We do have special exemptions for Habitat for Humanity if they come in to build homes. PCD list, find funding sources. That's something else that we could look at doing. We are a one-stop shop for building permits. You don't have to go to 3 different offices, generally speaking, if you just want to build something, although I imagine people could speak differently about that. We have completed, adopted, and enforced standard housing regulations, and that was with the International Property Maintenance Code, as was just referenced. Solid waste ordinances, and we can also update those with continuation of long-term contracts and outside parties. I do believe we're looking at expanding a landfill as well, is that correct? We're looking at expanding our C&D landfill, construction debris landfill. Regional landfills apparently are dying, although it's a goal in here for us to look at. Apparently regional landfills are not the future of landfills. Expand existing private landfills and reduce the volume through recycling, which we do. PC2 list, incinerators and single stream were studied apparently quite extensively to see what we could do with the recycling and the garbage, and it proved super expensive. Seek and establish appropriate uses for closed landfill areas. That's something that we can do, look at, as well as other land use. I think someone talked about a solar farm on a former one. I think somebody mentioned doing something about that at a certain point, but we can look into doing those things. Emergency services stuff, all that's ongoing. You know, coordination and partnerships are all ongoing things that we're doing with multiple municipalities and specialized response stuff. Monitor results of current radon, that's something we can discuss with the Home Builders Association. I don't know if that ever got talked about with you, if anything was ever done with it. I don't even know if that's a priority anymore with houses being built a little looser, the radon, because the Home Builders Association is specifically mentioned in the code here, so, or in the plan.
It hasn't come up.
All right, and it has radon, if we still feel radon's an issue, and that we want to address it, that's definitely something that we can do, although I think, have building standards been changed at all to allow the outpouring of radon?
No.
Okay.
Just recognize Tom for a second.
I'm sorry. All this came up because a lot of people get home inspections, and the home inspectors always say, oh, you gotta have a radon check. Number one, there's only one county in South Carolina that is on the building codes issues for radon, Greenville County. Oconee is not on that list at all. And two, there have been discussion because a lot of the builders, I do it, Brad probably does it, we automatically put in radon venting. It's automatic. We just do it it costs us $400 or $500 when we're putting in the foundation. I don't know that all builders do it, but most of us do. Most of the guys that are in the Home Builders Association do anyway. And we have had those discussions in the past but there's no agreements or anything like that with the county. But we have dealt with this whole idea, this radon issue. So
And that's come up as a building code issue too, or building codes with you. And, yeah, go ahead, Ben. Now that we've opened up the whole floor.
Radon. Ben Turetsky. Radon has come up in another vein. Greenville Hospital System, a doctor looking at the incidence of lung cancer for people who do not smoke or have never smoked, is doing some work now, and what they're concerned about is that when you get into the areas that are not sewered or watered, that when they dig a well, you can if there's a lot of radon in the ground, it can get into the ground, into the water in the well, and that may very well be possibly what is causing kind of a cluster of unexpected lung cancer in kind of northern Oconee County, and also Greenville County has even higher radon than we do. But I'm not sure what the Planning Commission can do about it. It's just something that has emerged and seems pretty serious.
Thank you.
Could I just throw in an old science teacher's, granite emits radon gas. So, we live in an area that has it. We gotta deal with it. I mean, we don't have to deal with it regulatory wise, but it exists. Can't move away from the granite. Not in a
Clean Air Act, we're in compliance with. Review and upgrade county-owned medical, residential, nursing care facilities as needed. That's an ongoing thing. Community transport, CAT bus grant we got, the Clemson Area Transit, that's the CAT bus grants. Those buses are about $300,000 a piece, apparently, so that's why we need grants for them. Work with the Greenville Health Service for medical response, meeting the medical response times we're working on, as well as partnerships with public-private entities to study age-related issues is an ongoing item because, the graying of the population, I've heard. Road systems. It's ongoing maintenance. Steady revenue sources, apparently they're being looked at, as we've mentioned before. Priority road upgrade list is an ongoing thing that the road department has. We can probably find that list for you. Looking at curb cuts and limiting them is on our to-do list. Evaluation of all roads lying within the primary developments shown in the future land use map. It's ongoing. All this land use stuff is always ongoing, especially when it comes to the road department. Public funding for transportation is ongoing. as well as for the Clemson area transit. Non-traditional, not included 2 mass transit studies, but there are funding issues with the things they came up with. It's a shared area of responsibility for methods of expanding the transportation. It's not just ours, it's not just Clemson areas, it's a shared mutual thing. Support efforts to establish high-speed rail stop in Clemson or Toccoa, Georgia. If that's something that we'd like to look at, we can certainly look at that. There is a lot of self-guided tourism, campground upgrades that have occurred in the area. And that's convention centers and parks and rec. County parks have been upgraded as well as boat ramps. And then everything for creating grants and updating county maintained parks has definitely upgraded and are ongoing. Expansion of runway length, that's already been complete. Moving the runways around once again, ongoing and somewhat complete. Construct additional hangars, that's ongoing. Develop ongoing capital improvement programs. Those are all complete and ongoing. We have partnered with the Clemson Flying Tigers, and there are hangar lease agreements. So in the objective 11, there's no community facilities plan. That's something that if that's something we're looking into, planning commission can discuss. Since there's no community facilities plan, it's kind of stalled. Applicable elements population. Seek partnerships and other form of assistance for the school district. That's ongoing. The county holds a lot of events for local festivals, entertainments. For the Oconee Heritage Museum, the county provides $30,000 per year and an employee, as well as soliciting donations of artifacts. High quality libraries. We definitely have great libraries here with great programs. So that's definitely an ongoing item. The courthouse got added to the National Historic Registry. Study, identify additional cultural and historic properties. That's complete and ongoing. By complete and ongoing means we've done some of it, but there's always an additional need for it. I suppose I should have clarified that at the beginning. Local historical and cultural groups, ongoing. We've completed the GIS data maps to see where these historic things are. The Appalachian Farmstead project is defunct, so that should be an easy thing to edit when we do the update. Review and adopt appropriate standards aimed at maintaining the state scenic highways designation for Scenic Highway 11. We've done that. Review and update regulations as needed to ensure all cultural, historical, and natural resources receive protection. That's an ongoing thing. And those are your goals for the 2015 comprehensive review. Everyone awake?
Nicely done.
And I'd like to commend staff on the work they did on the whole 120-something pages.
That was work by anyone. Thank you. I'll pass it along.
When you list something is complete, when the plan is updated, will that disappear off of the chart?
That's certainly something to discuss. We'll look further into it. Because we're doing the review so close to the update, I think we could possibly we could put complete on there. That way it shows it, because the 2020 is the update. So this is just review. So we could probably leave it on there and just make it prettier, not bright red, not with my slang on there. Would you prefer to remove it?
No, I was just asking the question.
That's what you're talking about for the 2020.
Right, yeah.
Yeah,
So that's why, when we do the update, then all the completed items disappear.
Correct. And we could reference them if you like somewhere in there, say, hey, and this has gotten done in the last 10 years, but yes.
We did something. Okay. All right, so what is the proper procedure for?
Well, y'all need to send, whatever you send, you need to do a resolution by positive majority, so 4, no matter how many people are here.
Okay.
My preference is, you can do it piece by piece, but because of the way our comp plan is set up and the goals bleed over the categories, and because they've gone through them so fast, I don't know how long you anticipate getting through the rest of the elements.
If depends on tonight, if I can probably, hopefully by the last meeting of this year, give you the last element, the priority investments element, and that's kind of the most tricky one. But hopefully by the end of this year, the review from staff getting it to planning commission, if it doesn't come back to us, that you should have it. So in the next 3 meetings.
Okay. My thinking is that y'all review that last element at the end of this year, and then we'll have the whole package. and any comments, any tweaks, or whatever, and then we could do the resolution at the beginning of the year, sending the whole thing forward, as opposed to sending, like every
Section by
other
section.
week, because it's gonna end up, it's a bit of a mess.
Is there any objections?
Do we need to vote on this part and just,
No, I think, because I still think y'all have some, it's almost like minutes at this point, for y'all to go over this and we come back, yeah, we're good with these three elements, and the goals look good that Adam went over. It's gonna be changed from red and just letters to a little bit more formal and spelled out, but at this point, it was just a review. If y'all had any comments to make, you may have some when we go back next time, but we'll just have some more elements and go over those, and you may say, hey, about the population element, I want to change that. So that way we can put it all as one. And you can do them separately, but I think it makes sense to put them all as one, because we're gonna get them so close in time, because they're working so fast on them, we just get the whole thing to council at the beginning of the year.
suits me?
Everybody agree with that? Okay. And I personally would like to thank Adam and his staff for pulling all this together pretty quickly. They did a very good job.
Thank you.
Any old business?
Right, well, I got new business. I have to.
Any new business?
Any new business. In order for planning commission to get, compensated for the year, I have to give the attendance sheet for the year by like tomorrow, by this week. So everything can get paid out. Apparently last year that was an issue. If you could just email me and let me know if you're going to attend both of the meetings in December or not, or one or the other, things of that nature, so.
And the dates of the next two meetings are December
The 18th is one of them,
December the fourth and the 18th.
4 and 18.
Do I hear a
Motion to
motion
adjourn.
to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Adam,
Sir,
you might want to send Ms. Lyles an email.
I'll let her know, yes.
All right.
Okay, stop and